Do I have one quick moment here?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, welcome everybody. Welcome to this another exciting episode of Extra Bytes. And before we get on with the formalities, I think it is important for me to share that today we are streaming our 36th episode of Extra Bytes, and I think that is phenomenal considering how we started and when we started.
Right.
And the 6th episode is kind of an achievement in itself. And when we started Extra Bytes, the reason was that we want to inspire so many photographers in India and across the world with the wonderful journey, photography journey. There's these photographers have taken. It started with the thought of doing only landscape photography, covering only landscape photography. But then we have ventured into street documentary, advertising, and even fashion and wildlife. So many more sessions are lined up, but we are now going to go into prime time.
Okay, I think there's a lag.
Jesse lost his connection.
Bear with us, Candace.
Oh, I was worried it was going to happen on my end, so.
We beat you to it.
It probably has to do with the weather.
Oh, are you having some nasty weather there?
Yeah, at my end it is like I'm
Yeah,
from Eastern India.
So we're pretty close.
Is it raining in Seattle too for last 2-3 days, I think?
And this is the time when the monsoons start in India.
Yeah.
We have ocean, it's a peninsula. So we have ocean across all the sides. So the pressure builds up and this is when it starts raining. And it's the season when the rice is one of the biggest crops in India. And this is when is the time for cultivation of that.
Well, I think it's raining in Northwest as well. I mean, I'm in Gifford and it's raining since last 2-3 days.
I haven't looked it up, but I think we've probably had one of the rainiest springs on record here. And you know,
Yep.
Seattle's known for being rainy, but it's
Seattle
been
is
kind
always
of
raining.
supposed to finally start warming up next week. We lose him.
Yeah, I think Jesse might have trouble getting in. But in the interest of time and because we have a lot of live audience with us, I think we'll just kick it off. So,
I mean,
thanks.
I was west, but then I looked up Seattle and then I went and I think.
Okay, Atanu goes down as well. All right, so we have a lot of audience waiting for us and we'll kick it off, Candace. And thanks a lot for joining us today and making time for us.
Well, thank you. I just hope I'm not cursing you guys right now. You dropping off?
Maybe the goth background was probably in favor of us.
Okay.
No worries, we are back. Everybody is coming back.
Jesse is back. Jesse,
Jesse, you are on mute.
Okay, so I'm back, and there was this glitch that I don't know. I didn't even realize that I've been thrown out by Zoom itself. So sorry guys there. And where did I leave? Any idea? Can anybody tell me what was I saying?
You just started that thanks on 36th episode. That's it. After that you went blank. That's it.
All right.
I think
so
something was going on from Zoom side, because I was just got thrown out of Zoom and then I had to come in again.
I'm not going to go into these details. We have a wonderful photographer with us who is born and was raised in Ohio, but has moved to Washington State since almost a decade now. Her love for nature and everything around related to nature, and probably her love for hiking, has made her a wonderful photographer that she is. So without wasting much time, let me introduce and welcome CANDACE Dyer. So welcome, CANDACE, and tell something about yourself. How did you get into photography, and when did you get into the love of photography?
So I really, so you know ahead of time right now, I really should update my website because I think it says a decade or so I moved out here, but it's actually been about 15 years now.
Oh.
That I've been out here. But yeah, it doesn't seem like it's been quite that long, I guess. But yeah, I've been out here for a while now, since my daughter was an infant. She was, I think, 4 months old when I moved out here. And I was born and raised in the Cleveland area, the greater Cleveland area of Ohio. It's a long story as to how I got out to the Pacific Northwest, but it deals with my daughter at the time had some issues. She was actually born with some issues that now you would have no idea that she had any issues, but she was born with something called Pierre-Robin sequence, and there's actually a special unit out in Seattle for it at the Children's Hospital here. And her father at the time actually also he got a position as a game programmer. As you probably know, out in Seattle, video games are huge, and there's not much of an industry for that sort of thing in Ohio. There's not really a whole lot there for doing sort of creative things, and the economy wasn't too great at that point in time. So we were looking at some options to have sort of a better life for ourselves. And the Seattle move ended up happening as sort of a culmination of different things, and just kind of weighing pros and cons. Does it make more sense to stay here, or does it make more sense to start out in a new life in this area? And so what ended up happening was picture yourself in your early 20s, just leaving everything behind, everything that you know, and your family and friends, and moving across the country. And that's what I ended up doing. I really had no knowledge of the Pacific Northwest or how gorgeous it is, or, you know, it's a totally different sort of beauty. And Ohio has immense beauty as well in its own way, but the Pacific Northwest really blew me away. And for the first few years that I lived out here, I was sort of closed off to it because I was a stay-at-home mom and kind of being a 24-hour nurse to my daughter. So there's this like whole realm outside that I wasn't aware of. And finally, when I dove into working full-time again, photography kind of landed on my lap as a result of working around cameras. I was in the retail industry, and I was around cameras a lot. And I remember looking at the SLRs all the time and just thinking to myself, one day I'm going to have one of those. Those look really cool. And I would teach people about certain features on them, but I didn't have one myself. And so one day I just thought, I'm going to get one of those. I'm going to save up and get one of those. And so I did it. I made the leap, and got my first camera was a Canon. And I'm trying to remember what exactly the model was. I think it was called the XSI, the entry-level model, which is ancient now at this point in time.
Which year was that?
Sorry, what's that?
In which year did you buy your first camera? Do you
Yeah.
remember that?
So that was my first real full frame digital camera, was the Canon TSI. I had, the little point and shoots before that. I think I like had a little Sony point and shoot. And like,
but when was that? When was that? When did you buy?
That was in, oh geez, I want to say it was 2008. So it was either 2007 or 2008. And I kind of just bought it because I thought it would be cool to try out, I had taken photographs before, but was never serious about any of it. I went out with hikes. I went out on hikes with my dad all the time, and the different parks around the Cleveland area. Went to the North Chagrin Reservation a lot, but I wasn't serious about anything. I just, just taking little point and shoot clicks here and there. But I knew that it was a beautiful area that I was in, and I knew I wanted to explore it more. So I just decided to, on my time off, I'd go hiking a lot. Working in retail, I guess the upside of working in retail, there's not a whole lot of upsides, unfortunately, but one of the upsides was getting off the Mondays and Tuesdays is when I usually had off. So I would go out and about, and nobody would be out, because everybody, most people have like their standard work schedule and have the weekends off. So I'd be going out there on like Mondays and Tuesdays out hiking, and had this, awesome solitude. The places were usually to myself. And I just started bringing along that SLR with me. And I noticed that I was passing up a lot of things. Like I should maybe go a little bit slower and take it in a little bit more. And I started seeing things with the camera that I felt like I could see differently than if I didn't have it with me. And just these little sections, these small segments of nature would stand out to me. And then came the social media aspect, which opened up a whole new world for me. I didn't start out on Flickr. I know a lot of photographers did. I hadn't discovered that quite yet. So I started out more on Facebook and started sharing images on there. And it just kind of progressed slowly, and then more quickly, people would say, oh, I like what you did there. Or, that's really pretty. Where did you take that? People started commenting, giving constructive feedback too. And it really, it gave me a sense of belonging. And it made me feel like, hey, I can do something more than just sales, and more, I'm more than, a stay-at-home mom. Of course, I wasn't a stay-at-home mom anymore. I'm more than, my motherly role and my what's defined as my regular position in life, and I started becoming passionate about something, which was totally new to me. I'd never felt that sort of feeling before. And, people have hobbies, of course, but this wasn't the same for me. I had hobbies before, but this was like just wanting to dive in, and that was all I could think about and all I wanted to do. So I'd start I'd be at work, during the day, and I could just think about wanting to be outside in the wilderness, or taking my daughter out there. So so that was kind of how it landed in my lap. And I think that's how it is for a lot of photographers, actually, is you just, it kind of just falls in your lap. You pick up a camera one day, especially in the Pacific Northwest. I mean, it's kind of hard to not be taken aback by the beauty here, I don't know if that sort of answers the initial question, but that's
very
started for me.
That's quite interesting. And so to say that you were never keen on any other genre of photography other than landscape, so that never attracted you, maybe people or your friends and clicking their portraits, or you were only focused on, or you only liked, or you enjoyed, since you enjoyed being a part of nature, so that came naturally to you?
Yeah, so nature itself was really what attracted me first. I was influenced by certain photographers, seeing their work. Art Wolf was actually the first photographer whose work really stood out to me, and the conservation aspect. It wasn't one of those things where there were several people that I was taking workshops from and I just dove into it. It was more like I discovered this community and just started sharing my stuff. And it was really just the pure love of nature that spurred it on for me. And having a few friends that would tell me, you know, there's a whole community out there. You should start sharing your stuff. It's pretty good, you know. But it wasn't like this thing where I just started taking multiple workshops from people and that sort of thing. And I would advise that's a good route to go, obviously. That's, you know, one of the best ways you can learn is finding somebody who inspires you. I didn't do that when I first started out. I just was kind of self-taught and dove in that way. And it was just my love of nature that kept me going.
That's amazing. That's really inspiring. And so you have a full-time job right now also, and you are a mother as well. So how do you balance things?
It's a great question.
It's really amazing to see. It's, I think, kind of inspiring for everybody.
Well, so it's not easy. I'll say that. I do really wish I had more time to spend with photography. And watching my husband, Ryan, as everybody knows, you know, he does it full time and has for some time now. But at the same time, it's primarily, I'm primarily also working full time because my primary focus in life right now is my daughter. And I think that, you know, there's a lot of photographers, a lot of landscape photographers who, you know, if you're able to travel a lot, and you don't have, I guess the word is responsibility of, you know, having sort of a base with children and all that, it makes it easier for you to travel around or travel the world, right? Or even if you do, you know, usually somebody else is there with your kids. So for me, it's a nice balance that I have right now, because even though I'm working full time, I get a decent amount of time where I can use for photography. I work in marketing full time. I'm a territory manager for a marketing firm, and so I'm used to promoting things all day long. And the last thing I really want to do for my passion is to promote myself, because I feel like it's so tedious during the day. And I'm also just not really that interesting of a person. Pretty boring. So it's just the last thing I'd want to do is go out there and be like, hey guys, look at me, look how cool I am, because I'm not really cool. And also I feel so fake doing that. And I'm going to sound like a horrible person saying that to some people, because there's probably some people watching who are like, well, what? I like to promote myself. How does that make? And I'm not talking about anybody else. This is just, this is my own thing, right? So it's really something that I like to do for myself on the side. It's sort of my selfish thing, you could say. And I do workshops. I do workshops part-time for right now. And I find that that's a nice balance for myself for right now, at least. And I've thought, well, maybe I should do that full-time in the future. I have really thought about that. And it's funny because it was something I really thought about right before the pandemic hit. And it's probably good that I didn't just jump into it, all things considered for right now. But it's not a bad position to be in, to have a full-time job and also try to be doing something with photography and try to pursue that. You know, there's sort of this notion, I think, for people that you have to dive in head first, and that's not necessarily true. Maybe it's not for you. You know, maybe you'll find that if you dive in, you're going to lose your passion for it because you're focusing too much on the financial aspect. So maybe it's a good idea for you to give it a try, you know, do a few workshops here and there. Because I have noticed that for some who are doing it full time, they tend to become a little more jaded with it. Some people just love it. They can't imagine doing anything else. You know, this is my life, and awesome, good for them. But you also, I think the most important thing is that you don't want to lose that passion for it, because that's what got you into it, right? That's what made you in the first place. So if you start thinking to yourself, what is it that other people would want? What is it that's going to get me the most likes, the most comments? Then you're losing the whole point of it, you know? Absolutely. What's the point then if all you're caring about is what other people think? Because art is expression. It's supposed to be you. What are you putting out there? How are people going to connect to it? Whether or not they like it or resonate with it, that's really for them to decide. But ultimately, you as an artist or photographer, you're sharing something. And, you know, you're sharing a very personal part of yourself. For me, I just hope it conveys something emotional with the viewer, maybe tells a story. And whether or not they like it, you know, from that point on, that's not for me to decide. And hopefully some people like it, but I'm sure there's a lot of people who hate it, what I share as well. But I'm not going to dwell on it either. And the last thing that I would want is to do this sort of thing to the point full time where all I'm thinking about is how do I please others? So for right now, it's kind of, I'm in the experimental phase, I guess you could say, with it, especially right now. I'm supposed to be doing a workshop next weekend at Mount St. Helens, and I canceled it because half of my group was supposed to be coming from Canada, and they can't come down right now due to what's going on. So I postponed it. I know some people are running workshops right now, but my workshops for the year postponed. Ryan and I were actually going to do a workshop in Glacier National Park this fall. We were finalizing the permits, and then everything hit. So, so yeah, we were gonna, I guess that's something that you could look out for starting next year, pending everything going on, is that we're gonna start working together more. But it's not something that I plan on doing full-time anytime soon. I have a nice balance where, as of right now, I'm able to do something else that I'm pretty decent at. It's not that stressful, not terribly stressful. I work for a small company, very supportive people. They know I do photography. The somewhat annoying thing is that I'm asked to do portraits that I'm really not good with for families. That's just, I think it's just bound to happen. If you tell anybody that you do photography, it doesn't matter if it's landscape or nature, all of a sudden you're gonna get, can you take wedding photos for me? Can you take photos of my baby? And that's awesome, you know what? Because most sane people out there, that's what they want photos of, right? Yeah. I'm the person who's like, let's take a picture of a slug, you know? Like, I'm not right in my mind compared to a lot of other people. So they don't quite understand when you say to them, yeah, I'm not really that good at that, you know? They assume that you are. So I have to deal with that sometimes with people at my workplace. And I did some photos for a coworker of mine, and I do them for company events. I'm not good with shooting people, I guess you could say. I'm told that I'm decent. I just don't feel like that's not my thing, obviously. So having maybe a minuscule person in a landscape, even that I don't do, as you can probably tell if you've looked at my stuff. I don't even do that really, unless it's maybe my daughter or something. But yeah, it's a nice balance that I have going right now, where you know, I every year can take a few solid weeks to do whatever I want, and so it's nice because I can even work remote if I have an internet connection and spend some time away. And so I'm enjoying that so far. As far as mom life goes, my daughter's 15. She, with everything with the pandemic going on, it's been challenging trying to keep her entertained. People are being homeschooled right now, but she comes with me on a lot of my journeys, a lot of hikes with me, and she is a big influence actually to me and what I do, because she encourages me to take a look at certain things that I wouldn't have noticed before. There's actually images that I have that she's like, hey mom, look at that. Did you see that? She's actually got a really good eye. She doesn't realize it, but she's got a really good eye. And she keeps me grounded. She keeps me really grounded because sometimes you can lose sight of what's important. And the truth is I don't always need a camera with me when I'm with her. So a lot of times I'll just bring my phone because it's about bonding time. It's about connecting with her. And every once in a while I'll see something, I'm like, man, I wish I would have brought my camera. So I end up taking it on my phone, and just like, okay, well, I didn't have my camera for this, but at the end of the day, you have to realize the most important things in life, and that's where she keeps me grounded. And that was a really long answer to your question.
But that's
does your daughter?
Yeah.
Does your daughter want to be a photographer when she grows up, or does she say, okay, give me your camera, let me try it?
So I think that Ryan and I ruined it for her. And I say that because for her 10th birthday, I think it was her 10th birthday, we got her an entry-level SLR camera. And we did it there was no intention of being like, I'm going to throw a camera at you. This is what you should do. There's some people out there who are like, you have to play soccer or you're going to play baseball. We're not like that at all. This was just like, she was always eager to come along, taking images. And especially, we've got something called, there's Skagit Valley here. During the springtime, there's just fields and fields of tulips, different colored tulips and daffodils. And she really loved that at that age. And she would come up and she had her little camera, a little point and shoot camera, and was taking pictures. And she even got up at the crack of dawn, right before dawn actually, and came up, and she seemed really into it. So we got her a camera, like a solid camera, and she freaked out. And I think it was because it wasn't like, it was totally different. It was a totally different world for her. She's like, what is this? What are these dials? What are these functions? And she freaked out. And I was just telling her, it's just one thing at a time, take it step by step. And she got really frustrated and was like, but it doesn't look like what you're doing. Like, well, how are you doing what you're doing? And so she just got, and so I told Ryan, I was like, we just totally like mess things up for her. And so she kind of refrained from it at that point. And I think it was a little bit early to get her into that. But she has continued to love the hiking aspect, and she loves seeing wildlife. She'll go out hiking with us or with me, and she'll just stop and see something and point it out, things that I might normally pass up. So that's what really encourages me. Like I was saying, she influences me more to slow down and take in the things that that a lot of us pass up, actually. And I think it's really encouraging to see things from the perspective of a child, because we lose a lot of that growing up, right? We lose that innocence, that imagination, that sort of eye that you have as a kid a lot of times. So she encourages me to kind of think that way. As art is really, it's sort of your child coming out, right? That's your creative part that you hold on to, that a lot of us lose growing up, right?
That's fantastic. That's
right.
Really
awesome.
Yeah, we would have many more questions, but I think it's time that we start savoring your wonderful images, that we understand, that watch them and look at them, and just take us through that, some of your images, and then probably I have few questions, but then we'll take them up little later.
Okay. Would you like me to share some here?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see here.
Candace, while you're at this, I had a question for you.
Yes.
Okay. There's a lot of guests that we have had so far. again, engineers, and then, people who have studied philosophy, and then Erin actually, studied architecture. Now, and they attribute their diverse, concentration in studies as a contributing factor to photography. It allows them to complement and then soak up the environment, probably because they don't come from that background, right? Most of them. Now, you are quite a rarity, right? You studied art history. I'm sorry. You studied, and has that played any role in terms of what you are today, in terms of probably, creating that progression in your life towards nature?
Can you see my screen, by the way? I just wanted to make sure you can see what I'm sharing. You can see it?
Yeah.
Okay. To answer that question, I'd say that it wasn't art history that led me into photography, but what was interesting was seeing how paintings that I had learned about throughout college or on my own, I would see sort of impressions of certain types of art while I was out photographing. And so that would kind of influence me, if that makes sense at all. Something like this image, to me, the different colors that you see with the fall foliage, that to me, in my mind, I'll immediately think of, impressionistic sort of art. And I don't know how else to explain it other than when I'm there viewing it, my mind kind of sometimes goes in a totally different place, and I think of something else. I see colors sort of in a different way sometimes, if that makes sense. So, and it might not be when I'm there in the moment, but when I'm processing too, just certain patterns or colors will form that stick out to me, that resonate with me. And I'll think of maybe, a certain work of art from that I had seen before, but it wasn't art history that led me into photography in any way. It's just, it's more like it's something that I reflect on within photography, if that helps answer your question.
Yes, absolutely. So
Absolutely.
Romanticism or Impressionism, which one attracts you more?
I'm sorry, what was that?
I was asking, do you value Romanticism over Impressionism or vice versa?
Oh, that's a hard question, because it's really more about the image itself. I think that with whatever mood I'm in at the time, it's not about valuing one over the other to me. But I would say that if I had to choose, that Romanticism, luminism, the play of light, dramatic light, that's really, when you're thinking about photography, a lot of it is the light, right? And so, I was primarily, as far as photography goes, with landscapes and nature, to me, the biggest influence is the Hudson River School. And I know Ryan's already talked about this, so I don't want to bore you guys to death, but that play of dramatic light, when I first saw those paintings in college, and I immediately wanted to learn more about it because I was just blown away. I lived in Ohio, so everything was really flat. You don't have mountains there. You don't have this grand, raw scenery. And I just thought to myself, how can that actually be real? Like, how can that exist? And obviously they painted it. So there's, this drama there that is, it's accentuated, and they go, for some of the paintings that you'll see, like from Bierstadt, or Thomas Cole, you'll see this drama that you're just like, that there's just no way that nature can do that, right? Without having ever really experienced that sort of thing. But they had a way of being able to emphasize how you can't control nature. Nature is something that is to be respected, right? So in art, though, in art history, that totally blew me away. I had never experienced anything like that before. That's totally different than Impressionism, though, where Impressionism was more about the play of colors to me. And like in this image, it's actually kind of a nice fuse between the two, in my opinion. I could be way off base saying that, but having sort of the dramatic light and then the different points of color and in the foreground there uniting, that's, to me, it's got the sort of the painterly thing going on in the front. But you also have the dramatic drama, the dramatic light. This particular image is from Paradise at Mount Rainier, if you weren't familiar with that already.
Thank you, Candace.
Yeah, so share something about this, or maybe other images. And
this image right here. So this image was taken a few years ago during peak fall color at Paradise at Mount Rainier. And I don't like sharing what people consider to be typical scenes. It's funny because a lot of people go to Mount Rainier and shoot the mountain, the main mountain, and with good reason. It's a tremendous mountain. And for me, most of my images have nothing to do with Mount Rainier. It's actually, this specific one is of the Tatoosh Range. And I frequently will spend more time just taking pictures of other areas in that national park. But this particular image was just, I was following the light, which is what I often do. There's a lot of times I go out there and there's no set plan if I'm shooting on my own, which for this particular shot, I was alone at the time. I believe Ryan was doing a workshop or something. So I decided to go out on my own for a bit and just walked around. And the story of this particular shot is kind of funny because I was there setting up. I thought the colors looked really nice and the light was setting up to be something, somewhat dramatic, it seemed like. And these guys came over and told me I was in the wrong spot, that I should come over and go where they were. So I don't know what they were taking pictures of, but I guess the lesson that I thought I'd bring out of this is just, who knows, maybe they got a way better type of image than I did, and I was just totally clueless in what I was doing. But don't always follow what other people are doing. If you see something and you think it resonates with you, especially if it seems like it's a very striking or well-balanced scene, don't always be so curious to do what the other person is doing. And also there's just, for some reason, there's a tendency for some people to want to persuade other people to do what they're doing. I don't know why that is, but it's really annoying. And I don't know if I don't want to get into gender here or anything like that, but it happens, I think, to women a lot, where it's like this lost female thing, right? Like, let me help you. I don't know what it is, but anyways, so I ended up getting this image here. And then I actually went farther up the mountain and got another shot from a different perspective. I'm not the best role model for telling you to sit still and take a shot. I have a tendency to take a shot, get up and go somewhere else and take other images. I wish I had the patience of my husband. He will just sit in a spot and camp there and that's it. And he's got his thing, right? Meanwhile, I'm just like, oh, let's go over here. Let's do this. And I know that doesn't bode well for workshops either. But when you're doing workshops, you're teaching other people. So you're going around and helping them with what they're doing. It has nothing to do with anything about you. Or at least it shouldn't. If you're a good teacher, it should be about the person. So anyways, this image was taken as I was scurrying about, you could say. I just kind of decided to set up there, notice the different color palette, notice the light was looking good, and everything just kind of flowed together nicely. And that's a big part of photography for anybody starting out, is following the light. Where does it look like the light's good? Because you can see a scene, and if it's striking to you, the actual composition or the scene itself, great if it's a landscape. But if in the other opposite direction, the light's blowing up somewhere, or, you know, going off, maybe you should be thinking about what's over there. You know, and a lot of that has to do with planning, of course, which is a whole other thing that we could be getting into. But, you know, I knew that the sun sets over this mountain range, the Tatoosh range. I knew where the light was going to be. I've been there, I don't know how many times. So I had an idea of what it might end up looking like should the weather conditions, you know, bode well. And so that combined with the nice color harmony is what ultimately formed this shot. And that's paradise. And to me, I enjoy the view of the Tatoosh range just as much, if not more, than the view of Mount Rainier. And I'm probably in the minority when I say that. I'll try sharing another image here.
Yeah.
You able to see that one?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. So this image is of Waterfall in the Gifford Pinchot National Forest here. I always wonder if I'm pronouncing that correctly. If I'm not, sorry, folks. It was a lesser known waterfall. And before I go any farther, I got to give props to a guy named Brian Swan. He's the waterfall master. He runs a website that he goes around and finds waterfalls. He's like just this magician when it comes to waterfalls. And so waterfalls you never knew existed, he will go and he discovers them. I think he actually names some of them, but this is one that we had no idea existed. Ryan and I decided that we were gonna just kind of do a waterfall chasing trip. And I did some research, and I say research, but really what it was me finding this on Brian Swan's awesome website. And I thought that it looked interesting, although the images of it that I saw weren't quite anything like this. It was a very different kind of perspective. And I thought this waterfall was really interesting because of the obvious split down the middle. You know, it gives it kind of this unique sort of take. And to shoot this particular image, you were basically, and Ryan has a similar shot from here. I think his is way better than mine, but you're basically almost touching the water to get this perspective, which, you know, unless you're very careful, I don't necessarily recommend that. Have good insurance on your camera is what I could say. You should for just water damage in general, I would think. But this was a super wide angle shot. And this was taken, obviously long exposure as well. But I do like to have my personal preference is to have a little bit of texture in the water. Not a whole lot here, but I like where you can actually see a little bit of the texture in the water too. And my personal preference for if you're gonna do waterfalls is to have the water have kind of a refreshing sort of look. Not always, you know, that's not always the case depending on where you're at, but I think kind of like a cooler sort of tone to the water. So I did cool down the water a little bit. The light just happened to be pretty perfect at the time. It was early morning. And so the light was coming through the forest at the time. And just this lush foliage around it, I thought made kind of a striking scene there. But I don't know if this waterfall, if you can even still get to it anymore. I'm not sure. But I just thought it was kind of a neat, different sort of take and on a waterfall image. I had never seen anything quite like that before. So I thought I'd share this image. This is called, they titled it Emerald Cove. And it's I don't like saying where locations are if they're not well known. So I'm not gonna say what waterfall it is. That's just my personal preference. And there's plenty of people that can go find out what it is if they wanna go take a look. But this gets into a whole other topic that has nothing to do with this right now, but just, you know, the conservation aspect of not wanting to destroy the land and tread on the land. If it's not a well-known place, I I'm not going to go say, this is this particular waterfall, this is how you can go there. Because while I'm not that popular, and there might be, you know, I don't know how many people watching this, but the last thing I want to do is reveal a location to a place, and then all of a sudden there's groups of people destroying that location. So
totally agree with you on this.
I like to think that most people are responsible, but you know, it's been proven otherwise in the past. Okay, I'll try sharing another one. Is it okay if I share something with wildlife?
Oh, yes.
Yeah, please.
But, so, Candace, looking at your pictures, you like them lush. You're not really the typical Southwest or Death Valley person. I presume.
So I'll be honest, I want to explore Death Valley more. I haven't really had the chance to do that yet. That's on my list. That's on my itinerary. I've been to California plenty of times, and the Eastern Sierras, but I haven't done the desert nearly as much as I would like. So that's high on my radar. And Brian and I have been talking about going there. He's got plenty of images from that area, but yeah, we have something called the Alvord Desert here, and there's some desert areas, but it's not quite the same, as you probably know if you've seen any images of it. Let's see if this one showed up.
No.
So I think the lush aspect is more because it's just the environment that I've experienced so far. It's not necessarily personal preference. I just haven't had the opportunity to experience certain other landscapes. The other thing is that I've got a backlog of about 160,000 images or so or more that I need to still, I'm very slow with going through a lot. So there are more desert images that I have that I just need to process, and I'm terribly slow with it. So this one, I don't know if you can see the black bear.
Yes.
Okay. Can you tell I like fall color? It's not intentional that I'm sharing fall color images, but so this one was actually taken on a trip with my daughter. And this is from last fall. And I thought I'd share it because, you know, a lot of times you see for nature photography, you see it's either just a wildlife shot or it's a landscape shot. And I really like kind of the fusion of the two with landscape and the wildlife, where you're kind of showcasing both. And here, I could have easily zoomed in farther and just had primarily the bear, right? But it was just so colorful. And yes, the landscape actually does look like that at Paradise, by the way, during the fall. It looks like somebody took a bunch of neon markers or crayons and just went all over the landscape. That's how it looks there during the fall. This bear took us by surprise. And, you know, black bears aren't typically aggressive. You almost never hear of any kind of incidents with black bears happening, unless maybe I don't know, if there's a mother that's defending their young, but that's typically grizzlies, right? It's more like if you had a lone aggressive bear coming at you, but I wasn't scared at all because I know the likeliness of something happening is very low with black bears, but it's still good to be prepared and to be respectful. So this was taken at 500 millimeters. It's a 200 to 500 Nikkor that I shot it with. And then it's also cropped in a bit. So I actually received a little bit of, it was weird. I got some backlash from someone sharing this, saying that I was lucky to be able to like make it out alive or something like that. Or I don't know what they were saying, but, you know, just basically like, you don't know about bear safety and I don't know why they were saying that, because I did everything respectful. You just carry bear spray on you and you keep your respectful distance and you make noise when you see bears out in the wild. Grizzly situations are entirely different, if any of you don't know. With grizzlies, which you don't find at Mount Rainier, by the way, you need to react very differently as far as that goes. But we were coming around a corner at Paradise here, and there were two bears, a sow and what looked like a juvenile. And this juvenile was especially curious and didn't seem afraid. And the problem with that is that you don't want to be luring them in either. So we were turning the corner, and this one just started, you know, kind of walking a little bit closer. But what I think it was really just that it found some berries that were yummy closer to where we were. So I don't think it had anything to do with us. So we just kind of slowly backed our way out, gave it respectful distance. The mother, you can't see in the photo, but the mother's actually in the upper left hand corner there. And what I think was the mom, at least, looked like the sow. But they were just minding their business. And I just saw it as a good opportunity to take this photo. And, you know, it was just one of those things where you kind of, I can't help but feel something, some sort of a connection when I'm hanging out, checking wildlife out for a while, just to observe them for a while. It's a humbling sort of thing where you're observing them in they're constantly in survival mode. That's what they do. They're just trying to survive. And it's humbling because, you know, after this experience, I go back and, you know, we go back to our normal reality where we're doing whatever we're doing that seems important, but it's really not. You know, what's really important is survival, and that's all they're doing, right? So to me, it's a very humbling sort of thing to witness that. And it was great for my daughter. You know, she just was standing next to me watching it the whole time. Like, it's a great experience for kids, I think, to witness that sort of thing. But I thought I'd share it because I think it's a good example of the fusion of wildlife and the landscape together to a certain degree. And then there's also, you know, if you want to talk just straight wildlife itself on its own, I started to be drawn more into, are you able to see the image here?
You might want to zoom out. Yes, thank you.
Okay. So, did you say I should zoom out?
I think this is good. This is good.
Okay. So this is more of just a detail shot, and I chose to do more of an up close detail shot with this raven because its feathers, to me, were very striking. The ravens, I think a lot of times you just think of them and you think it's you know, it's just a bird, you know, it's not, or you know, you don't really think about them being colorful. I don't think too much, but they're actually very colorful when you get in closer. And I thought just all the detail up close here was what I wanted to emphasize. And they're very intelligent creatures as well. So what I was trying to convey with this image was sort of a connection, you know, looking into the eyes of another animal, no matter how minuscule that animal might seem to you, you know, it's another being. And this one, while maybe all it wanted was food, because other people may have fed it or something, is my guess. I was just observing it and observing its face and its features, and the conditions at the time where it was really foggy. I thought it led to a nice sort of misty aura, the background there. And he looks like he's judging me, I think. He looks like he knows too much about me. So I'm not quite sure what to think about that. But and talking about animals judging you, here's another one that looks like it's judging me even more.
Oh,
That one really had,
That's a beauty.
Yeah, so this one was also at Mount Rainier. I'm not intentionally taking images and showing them from Mount Rainier, it just happened. But as you can, you know, Mount Rainier is like in my backyard here, so I go there a lot. So this little guy, I was shooting sunset, and I was actually with a couple of other photographers at the time. This was one of my first significant winter outings, winter experiences, and at Mount Rainier, all places. And I was actually looking for a good place to take a sunset shot at the time. had my snowshoes on, up on the snowdrifts. And then all of a sudden, out of the corner of my eye, I see this little fella. And I was off alone at the time, though. At this point, I had separated from the two other people. And this little guy came over and just hung out with me all evening. And this was just this moment I caught by chance, where it looks like it maybe wants to have me for dinner or something. But there was this connection with this fox. I don't know how to explain it. This fox just was sitting there and hanging out. And I'm sure a lot of other people have experiences with foxes or wildlife, but something about this experience seemed to mark kind of a turning point for me in photography, as cheesy as it sounds. After this experience, there was a lot that happened for me that changed in life. And so it's probably just, coincidence, but very shortly after this, I met Ryan. And we hit things off, and I really dove into photography after this too. I really took it more seriously and considered it to be a passion of mine as well. And whether or not it has anything to do with this fox here, I don't know, but it looks like it's peering into my soul or something. I really don't know what. It was a neat experience though. And I call this one All Eyes on You.
Yes.
Yeah, my eyes on you. So it's got some kind of a different look that, so probably trying to take his chances with you.
Yeah, it's, a lot of times you see images for foxes. You see the little fox kits playing around. One of my favorite wildlife photographers, his name is Tin Man Lee, if you've seen his stuff at all. He's got some just incredible images of foxes. And a lot of times you see the foxes that are just playing with each other or hugging each other. And this is kind of a different thing where it's like looking into my inner being or something. I don't know. It took me aback a little, it was a little bit unsettling at first, but the truth is that it just hung out with me there all evening. It probably wanted food. I'm guessing people feed, the wildlife, and unfortunately they have to relocate them a lot of times, but it was still, it was the first experience that I had like that. You start to see certain beings differently sometimes when you actually feel like you connect with them. So, but it wasn't like coming up really close to me or anything. I want to be clear on that. Because I always want to keep a respectful distance, just like with the bear. So it wasn't very close to me. I wouldn't have let that happen.
What lens did you use for this? I think Monica Singh is asking that question.
Yeah, this one, I believe was the geez, it was so long ago, I'd have to go look it up, but this was the 70 to 200, I believe. So this would have been closer to 200.
Not too.
Yeah, it was still at a pretty good distance away. Respectful.
Yeah.
Sorry, what's that?
As long as you're safe.
Yes, yeah, definitely. I wouldn't have, I've had experiences at Rainier where the foxes come closer than I think that they should. And you can tell there was a black fox that came up to me. I think they might actually be called silver foxes. This one came up to me by Tipsu Lake, and I just had a feeling that people had been feeding it or something. So it's just always good to try to keep a respectful distance, because the truth is, for people who don't know, if you go and feed the wildlife, it makes it so that it's harder for them to learn to survive on their own. And so a lot of times with wildlife, if they become dependent on human food, then they don't know how to survive, especially through the harsh winter. Rangers, a lot of times, have to go and relocate them. That's happened several times before with animals. So it's just a good idea to always think of it as their home, that we're visitors and we don't own it. We're there in their home. Be respectful. That's how I like to view it.
Did you have a run-in with grizzlies ever?
Oh yeah.
Glacier? At Glacier?
Yeah, have you heard the story? I don't know how much.
That is assumed. Has to be glacier. That's the shining crown, right, for grizzlies.
It is. Particularly in, it seems like the many glacier areas when people see a lot of them, where people see a lot of them. My experience, my close encounter was, geez, how long ago was it? It was several years ago, and I was with Ryan. We were going up to Grinnell Glacier Trail, and we had been told that there was a bear in the area and to be aware. So we knew ahead of time that on the way up, people were saying, yeah, there's a bear up there, so you want to be careful. But I went into it with this notion in my mind. The previous year, a guy had been mauled on that same trail, and I believe he died. Ryan was telling me the story, so I was a little freaked out at the time. If somebody tells you, yeah, a guy died on this trail or a guy was mauled, then in your mind, you're just thinking, okay, I need to be super safe. And we had our bear spray. We took the proper precautions. But Ryan, you might already know, he has a lot of experience in glacier. Before he met me, he spent weeks at a time out there on his own. And he had already had some close encounters with grizzlies, including a sow with cubs before, who charged him.
Wow.
So we didn't have that experience, but we did have an up close experience on that trail where we were with a group of a couple other people, and among them was actually Alex Noriega. he can attest to this. And we found a little alcove type of area where we just decided we were going to take a bit of a break and like have some trail mix, whatever. And one of the members of our group, I remember, was kind of looking out and just like bear, bear, bear out of nowhere. And so we thought it was like kind of up the trail, like a ways away, like we still had some reaction time, not knowing that he really meant, yeah, the bear's right here. Like it's coming up on us here. And so we had very little reaction time. The bear started going up, and all of a sudden I remember right above me, just, a couple yards up, hearing, oh, you could hear it right above you.
Wow.
And yeah, I'll never forget that. And so we all just kind of froze. It's one of those things where, you hear people seeing ghosts or whatever, scary experiences, right? And it's one of those things where you just get like a chill up your spine. Yeah. And because you don't think it's ever going to happen to you, right? And so we all kind of just stood there as a group and we're in shock. And here comes this bear, starts coming down towards us. And at the time, we're just these ignorant people who really don't realize that the bear just wants to get down the trail and we're in the way. And it's probably thinking to itself, can you stupid people just get out of the way? They just want to get down the trail. It didn't care about us. It just was trying to make its way down the trail. And we didn't have much of an option, though, was the problem, because the trail width is it's just a few feet wide. You don't have a whole lot, and there's just a drop off several hundred feet. And the little alcove was sort of like our saving grace. So we started backing down the trail. And me, being a total idiot, holding my tripod in front of me like it's going to defend me against some sort of massive bear, right? Jeez, I was such an idiot. And Ryan had left his tripod up farther ahead when we were resting. His very expensive, really right stuff tripod was sitting up there, and he wanted to go back and get it. So all of a sudden, out of nowhere, while most of us remain frozen, Ryan he starts walking up and going, "Get out of here, bear, get out of here." And he starts yelling at it. And I'm like, what are you doing? Like, I'm an idiot. So of course I didn't realize that's actually a good move if you're trying to get a bear to go elsewhere. Our option was really just to have the bear go up and around. Yeah. It was either that or we back down the trail. And so he managed to by yelling at this bear, get it to go up and around. And the bear, I'll never forget the way the bear was looking at him. It gave him this look like, the heck is wrong with you? Like it was just kind of looking at him like he was crazy or something. But it worked. You know, he managed to, he had his bear spray in hand. Of course, he didn't get too close to it, but tried to make himself look big and was telling the bear to get out of there. And it looked like it was a lone male. Of course, you don't ever want to do that kind of thing to a sow with cubs. That'd be a horrible move. But just given the situation, it all seemed to work out. And I want to say the bear was only a few yards away. I mean, it was really close. And man, if you've ever been that close to a big grizzly bear before, it makes you feel so small. It makes you feel so insignificant, knowing that something like that can just totally rip you to shreds. You know, it's, if it wanted to, totally could. It's just sort of this raw element up front and personal in nature that you get. And I don't recommend it unless you have a group of people with you. But that was my up close grizzly experience. I've had others where I've seen them in the wild, just not that close. And for some reason, it seems like that particular trail has a lot of incidences of grizzly encounters. So smart thing to do for those of you going out to Glacier or in the wild, if you're gonna hike at sunset or sunrise, be in a group of people. Hiking alone is not the best idea. If you're gonna hike alone, if you insist, make a ton of noise. Bells don't really do much. Make a lot of noise, like with your voice. It's a good idea. Because the last thing you want to do is startle a grizzly.
So tripod saved the day. That's what you said.
Yeah, well, Ryan he insisted he wanted to go back and get his tripod. So, you know, I don't know. Honestly, I don't know what would have happened if he hadn't left his tripod there. We hadn't really discussed that possibility. But he had already had, you know, some experiences out in the wild with grizzlies before. Before he knew me, he was with someone else, as far as I know, in another relationship out in Glacier, and they came across a sow with cubs. And the person he was with tried to run, it sounded like, and he basically like stopped them from running. Like, what are you doing? That's the worst possible thing you could do. Do not run from a grizzly, especially a sow with cubs. It's a bad move, really bad move.
I think that holds true with every wild animal, because they say that they are trying to just judge you and gauge you and your expression and your behavior. And the moment you turn your back towards them and trying to run away, that is when you've lost it. And
Yeah,
till
I mean,
they hold their ground, they will also continue to hold their ground, and probably nothing will happen.
yeah, the vast majority of the time, they don't care about us. I mean, they're just doing their thing.
Yeah.
If they're going to react aggressively, it's generally either because they're defending a kill, or you know, it's a mother defending her young who sees you as a threat because she's seeing how big you are. You know, what's your size, judging you from your size. Are you a threat? Is what they're saying. You're in their home turf. Are you a threat to me on my home turf? That this is their area. It's a territory type of thing too. And also, have they, you know, have they killed something and they think you might take it from them? You know, are they eating? They have like a place where they're eating something, or are they starving? You know, that's the other rare thing, is sometimes you hear incidences of bears that are just really, really hungry. They're starving. That doesn't happen very often. It's pretty rare, but it can. And then you hear, you know, there's stories of people who go out and try to make friends with grizzly bears. I think there was like a series or a TV documentary on it or something. Not a good idea. It doesn't end well, usually.
Anyway, I think the bear knew Ryan doesn't shoot bears, right? So
best way, I mean, if you're going to shoot wildlife, please shoot it with the camera. I'm not trying to say I have anything against hunting. It's not for me, but hunting for survival is something that I respect. You know, if you're going to use all the parts of the animal, or, you know, if it's something that you're doing as a means to feed your family, I get it. You know, hunting for sport not a fan of. It's especially, there's endangered wildlife that people do that with. So
Bottom line, that you cannot outrun any of these animals, except humans probably, apart from tortoise or something, they can't outrun any animal. So best to hold your ground.
right. Did you want me to share anything else?
Yes.
Please,
Or-
please share some images. Yeah.
I wasn't sure if I should keep sharing. Let's see here. I'll share something a little more intimate here. Guess it's not. Okay. If you can see this or not. Are you able to see it?
No.
You have to zoom out. I think just showing the ribbon.
Where? Sorry, my screen is being a little wonky right now, so my apologies.
You are able to let me log you out of the screen share, then you can share again. Yeah, now you can try again.
Okay.
Just check.
Can you see it now?
Mhm.
Not yet.
You want to share the website or something?
No. Let's see. Can you see it now?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. So this image, upon, I don't know why that wasn't working, but upon first look, it might not seem like anything special. It's kind of a simple scene. It was taken at Olympic National Park. And this photo was taken, this is an example of a photo that for me, it really shows sort of an emotional aspect. What I was feeling at the time, I was trying to portray what I was feeling. I took this photo, sorry for me to talk about, sorry. I took this photo when I knew that my grandfather was getting ill. I took this photo and I knew that my great uncle had recently passed as well. And this photo just kind of, I thought, showed my emotions were very, I was kind of feeling low at the time. But the two trees in the middle, I don't know what it is about them. The two trees sticking together reminds me of my grandpa and his brother, my great uncle, because they went through a lot together. They went through a lot, they endured a lot.
That's so you're going to say that the kind of mood that you are in, so you end up somehow that ends up influencing the kind of images that you're creating. Does it happen so while you're in the clicking?
So the thing is, when I was taking this image, I wasn't thinking specifically of that. I went through my images afterwards and saw this image, and it resonated with how I was feeling at the time. So when I took the actual shot, it just happened to be very moody, and as it often is in Olympic National Park, foggy with the trees. I love fog and trees in general. It's one of my favorite combinations in nature. So I have a ton of foggy forest images that I still have sitting there that I need to process, but I went through some of my shots from there, and at the time was just feeling really low and came across this one. And something about it just made me, how I was feeling at the time, it resonated with me, and it was something that I wanted to put out there. And I actually, when I shared it, had a little bit of a story, and how, my family, my grandfather and my great uncle, just together, how, from what I know, they went through a lot. They grew up during the Great Depression here, which, about that, was really hard time for a lot of people. And my grandpa told me a lot of stories about how he grew up, and I know, as much as I didn't really know my great uncle as well as I would have liked, I know that they just, you know, they stuck together throughout it all, even into their, you know, the late 80s, around 90. They were older when they passed, and had all of these memories and stories, and these two trees just kind of sticking together made me think of that, despite all the turmoil and, you know, the tough times they had to go through, right? And the bird, I don't know, the bird, you know, a lot of people place birds in their photos. This bird was there at the time, and wasn't placed or anything. It was there at the time, and it just my great uncle had recently passed, and my grandpa took kind of a turn not too long after that, and just something about, you know, this sort of, hey, you know what, no matter how bad it gets or how bad things get, you know, it's okay, you're going to persevere. Something about that symbolism of being able to be free and take flight, and hoping that now they're, you know, they're in a better place, or I'll eventually see them again. Not to get too serious, but I thought I'd share this because of the emotional aspect. And also, it's not a black and white photo, but upon first glance, it almost looks like that, right? I could have made it black and white. I decided not to. It's just very muted in color. And I wanted to share it also because I think storytelling is an important part of photography too, for me at least. There's a lot of people that just, you know, throw out images and just have a title or, you know, a short description about the place. But for me, every once in a while, at least, it's a good idea to share something personal about how you're feeling. Art has a great way of being able to show that personal side and that emotional aspect of yourself.
I love the shot.
Yeah.
And I call this one's called Reverence. It's just out of respect for my great uncle and my grandpa. And let's see here. Something a little bit more.
Would you rate Olympic National Park higher than Glacier National Park? Between the two?
Sorry, what was the question there?
Would you rate Olympic National Park higher than Glacier National Park?
Oh my, well, they're very different. They're very different national parks. So Glacier is more like mountains everywhere. I know, so if you ever drive on Going to the Sun road, the first time I drove on that road, I just was a blubbering mess. I was in tears. Ryan said the same thing. He can attest to the same thing. It has that effect on people. It's just, you first drive through that park on that road and it just takes your breath away. It's everything that you see from, like what we were talking about with the Hudson River School, it starts to make sense. You know, you see it in front of you, right? So it has that mountain majesty sort of feeling. More than anything, and you've got the wildlife and you've got waterfalls. Olympic National Park it's very diverse. So I always tell people, if you really want to experience the Pacific Northwest in a few days, go to Olympic National Park. And there's other places you can go to, of course, but at least in Washington, I think that's probably the best overall experience you could get of the Pacific Northwest. And I say that because you get rainforest, you get rugged beaches with sea stacks, you get Hurricane Ridge, which is mountains as far as the eye, you know, peaks as far as the eyes can see. You can drive up a road and see these dramatic mountain views. So there's all these, and there's Lake Crescent as well, which is, as far as I know, I think it's one of the deepest lakes in the US too. And there's all this mythology around it too, which I find fascinating. But yeah, they're very different in their own right. So I wouldn't say I favor one over the other. Glacier is a personal favorite national park of mine for sure. But at the same time, Olympic National Park is just, it's such a gem that we have right here sort of in our backyard, and it's very different. And the diversity is just, I'm very thankful to have it here. So, but it's hard to compare and favor one over the other. I'm actually trying to get my parents to come out and visit and have them experience, they still have to experience both of those places. And on our radar is Olympic National Park. It's a good place to take family members to if they've never experienced the Pacific Northwest.
Thank you. Yes, the image.
Oh, can you see it okay?
Yeah, we can.
And by the way, if I'm rambling on too much, please tell me, because I have a tendency to do that. I'm very well caffeinated at this point. So if I'm talking too much, just let me know. Feel free to interrupt me. Like, Candace, shut up. I don't know what you're talking about. Just feel free to tell me. So this image, this is another one. Take a quick drink here. That I took when I was out with my daughter. And I was very disappointed at the time because I wanted her to see Mount St. Helens. She had never seen the mountain. And Mount St. Helens, which I usually call her Lewitt, that's the, there's different mythology. There's a lot of different mythologies, stories that are based on that mountain. And there's different terms for the mountain. And Lewitt, I think, is the term that is the most appropriate. But this was actually taken from around the Lewitt viewpoint. And the mountain was being moody. She, I say she for Mount St. Helens, but I think that Mount St. Helens, from my experience, is the most moody and mysterious mountain peak. But that's why I love her, because you just never know what she's going to do. And this morning that this was taken, she decided that she was going to tease us and start to showily reveal herself and then go hide back under the clouds, and was kind of like, no, I'm done with you guys. I don't care about you. So we were on this trail and I felt really bad because I really wanted my daughter to experience the mountain, because when it does come out after it's been in the clouds, it's just this very dramatic, like, ah, you see the mountain come out and it's just an awesome experience. But that didn't happen. And she was kind of bummed. So we walked around the trail and just decided to hike a bit. And then the sun started coming out a bit more, not to the point where the mountain was coming out, but just to the point where we could see all these little droplets everywhere on the foliage. And this is the reason I'm sharing this. It's not so much because of the image itself as it is sort of a good lesson to people who maybe are starting out in photography, that if you go with something set in mind to take images of, don't let that be your end point. Don't let it be a deal breaker for you. What I mean by that is, if you're like, I'm going to go out and take these epic photos of Mount St. Helens. I want the wildflowers to be right here up close in the foreground. These, this paintbrush or whatever it is that you have, and you just have this thought in your mind. That's great if you have it envisioned, good for you. But you know what? It's very unpredictable, the weather there. So what are you going to do if you can't take photos of the mountain? And this is where your creative side, I think, really starts to kick in, because the fact is, anybody who's been doing landscape photography for a while knows that the weather a lot of the times does not cooperate, or you don't get the conditions that you want. It could be, clear skies or overcast skies, and maybe you want partly cloudy or something. That's what you're looking for. But I think there's a good lesson to be learned, that your creative side really shines when you're resonating with something very closely, when you're taking your time, I think, and picking something out within a larger scene, and when you allow yourself to maybe see something in a way that other people might not see it. And you know what? This scene here, this sort of thing's probably been shot many times, as far as I know, but I had never seen anything quite like it before. And I just was kind of stunned by all of this morning sort of dew on the foliage there. I thought it was really beautiful, the colors that were reflecting off of the water, the foliage, and it's a very simple scene, but it seemed to me to work pretty cohesively, and I loved all the detail and the patterns here. To me, it resonated with me at the time, and it was neat showing it to my daughter because she didn't see it at all. She was paying attention to like the butterflies and the elk down below. She was paying attention to her own thing. But yeah, the lesson is to don't be so quick to be disappointed or to just kind of like pack up and leave from a place because it doesn't go the way you want it to, and that's something I try to teach people with workshops as well. There's a lot of people who don't teach that way. You go out with something set in mind. You're going to shoot something maybe very iconic that you want, a grand scene, and that's great. But maybe also think about what else there is, because all of the elements of nature come into play. It's not just about the grand scene. To me, this is just as important as the grand scene. It's something that we usually pass up, but it's a part of it all. It's an element that makes up the whole, right? So that's what this is for me. And I call this Come Undone, which I'm terrible with titling my images. And they usually come after, they're usually named after songs, by the way, just whatever I'm listening to at the time or a song that resonates with me. But, that notion of coming undone is just to kind of like unravel yourself or kind of let down your barriers or your walls. And this, I thought, was kind of like in an emotional way, like, how do you feel when that sort of thing happens? You just kind of emotionally let everything go, right? So I thought this kind of resonated with that. Hopefully that makes some sense.
Yeah.
Did you want me to walk through any more images? I've got more, but I'm not sure how many you wanted to go through.
Yeah, please. Probably show some.
Yeah. I think we have time for a couple of more. Yeah.
Couple more? Okay. Any preferences? Anything in particular you'd like to see?
I think it came for a fleeting second. I don't know exactly where it was with the rainbow. And
yeah, that's a common one. Okay, that people like to see.
Yeah, but yes, I think that's absolutely gorgeous.
The one with the rainbow is the one you like?
Yes.
Okay, let's see if I can find it. Is it showing okay?
Yeah.
Okay. So yeah, this was from Colorado, the San Juan Mountains of Colorado, taken about 4 years ago, I think now, in the summer. It was my first time going there, and it was actually on a trip with both Ryan and Miles was there too. And there was another friend, Cody is his name. And we all spent like a week out here and really lucked out with the weather conditions to the point where we had people cursing us for it. This is not something that ever happens, by the way. I'm not sure what happened, but we had 3 evenings back to back with rainbows.
Wow.
Storms and rainbows. And this one was the second evening, I believe. This particular one, it was just one of those moments where we were joking about it at the time because we were just like, oh, what if it happens again? We didn't think it was actually going to happen, but it did. We're like, what if we get another rainbow? And then it came and appeared. And I decided to take videos of everything going on at the places when they happen because I was like, nobody's going to believe this. And sure enough, I shared from, I think it was from Clear Lake was the other location. I had people trying to call me out and be like, that was just photoshopped in, that rainbow. That's not real. You just put that in. And I had a feeling somebody might say something like that at some point, because I would think it too if I didn't know, right? And because it just seems like it's too good to be true. And so I took videos of it during it, and I put little video clips up and was like, no, this actually happened. I don't know if I posted the video clip from this one, but I did from the other place. And you know, I have nothing against people putting rainbows into their shots or whatever, you know, composites, that sort of thing happens all the time. But I will say it makes it all the more special if it actually happens, right? If all the elements line up in nature as it should, because it's very rare that it does. And so we were all, Ryan, Miles, and I, we were all hanging out on sort of the edge of this hill leading up a very sketchy road. At least, you know, maybe for me, I'm probably just a wuss, but this road was pretty, I'd say it was kind of scary for some people at least. And I say that because, you know, there's just a huge drop off. It's not that wide. A lot of times you're dodging other people on this road where there's not quite enough room for two cars, one to go down and one to go up. And it's a very rocky road coming up here. And it's just a big drop off, you know, nothing's going to save you. So Ryan's Xtra wasn't actually able to make it up all the way. He was able to make it up most of the way. And we ended up carpooling with Miles and his Jeep up for the rest of it up to this spot, because that's how gnarly the road was getting. It was getting pretty bad. But the cool thing was when we got up here, we had the place to ourselves. There was nobody else. And so I think that made it all the more special. You know, just experiencing this. And even though we were all there together, we all had our own little spot, you know? So as this moment was unraveling, we all kind of experienced it in our own personal way, which I think is special. You know, some people might not feel that same way. Some people might be like, well, the only way to really experience it is with your loved one right by your side, hugging you or something like that, right? That makes sense. That makes total sense for a lot of people. But for me, you know, I was just sitting here, a blubbering mess, crying, taking all of this in and experiencing it in my own way, because I knew as it happened, I was never going to see anything else like that again. There was nothing that, even if I came back to this spot, it wasn't going to be the same conditions, you know? It was just one of those things where, and it was the same with Clear Lake, the other one, the other shot that I have with rainbows in it with mainly columbines in the front. This is the same type of thing where you see something that beautiful and that special, and you just kind of realize like, that's a once in a lifetime kind of thing. And so what do you do in your mind? You try to savor it as much as you can, because you realize that it's going to end, right? And so as quickly as it starts, it ends, right? And so you just kind of try to freeze that moment in time. And that's one of the things I think is so special about photography, is this is that moment, you know? This is kind of like the the overall climax of everything coming together, right? And so this is where it was, to me, like the most stunning point in time. And also I was trying to like go in like this, clearing up my eyes, because I was just so in awe of what was going on at the moment. And I think that it's just, I don't know how you couldn't cry seeing something that beautiful in person, right? Because it really just, it makes you think about things a lot differently, at least for me. It's this human component of you where you just kind of fall apart when there's something that overall consuming and magical. It's just this raw beauty, and knowing that that kind of beauty exists, that you only usually read about in fairy tales, you know, but you're witnessing it right then, if that makes sense.
That's
All
it.
that was missing was some unicorns, you know, little leprechauns going through the scene, and that would have made it more complete, I guess, right? Little pot of gold at the end of the rainbow.
They
So
could.
did you focus tag this?
I did. It was a pain in the butt. Yeah, I think there was 7 or 8 images.
Wow.
Fact. And I don't remember which contest I'm not a contest person. There's a lot of contest people out there, but I'm not a contest person, just because I usually don't think about it, or I miss like the notifications that come up in your emails, like submit photos to this contest. And I decided one day, the heck with it, I'll submit a photo to a contest. But they wanted, it was one of those things, I don't even remember which contest it was. They wanted your raw photos as well. And like, it was supposed to be like, they didn't allow a whole lot of manipulation or something. And I mean, I'll be honest, I did focus stacking, and, there's blending, and the rainbow, that they could see the rainbow was there originally, but I mean, there was a little bit of warping going on of the flowers, and it was all just to make the scene look cohesive and balanced in my mind, right? I don't like to change a whole lot to a scene unless I feel like there's something really distracting in it. It needs to be cohesive, in my opinion. So if there's like something really taking away from that my eye just immediately goes to, like, that's not how it should be, right? You don't want that to happen. You want to be able to take in the whole scene and have it be cohesive. You don't want to be like, oh man, that log over there is just, ugh. So that's how my mind works. At least some people might be more on the purist side of it, where they're like, no, just let it be. That's how it was. And that's fine. That's absolutely fine. But for me, I don't see anything wrong with taking the liberty of making something more cohesive, as long as you're not totally changing the scene. And if you are, be honest about it. If somebody asks you, is that mountain really there? Or was the, that, Milky Way, did that happen that evening? Just be honest. And that's what the approach that I take, at least, on it. But at the end of the day, it's all art. It should be subjective. I don't see the need in telling somebody that they need to do something how you prefer it to be, because there's no textbook on this. There's no rules. Like, this is how you have to do it, right? And so anyhow, what I was trying to get at with this image is just, I shouldn't submit it to contests, apparently. Now, it just, I don't like rules in photography, is I guess what I'm saying, in terms of like your creative flow. I think that you should be able to take the liberty of what you want to do, but be honest with whoever's viewing it. And if they don't like it, if they don't resonate with it, that's totally fine too. There's probably people who think this is a horrible shot. You know what? That's great. There's no like stunning light or anything in there. There's no dramatic sunset. It's just pretty wildflowers with a rainbow in a scene.
I think it's a pretty good shot, because considering that the fact that you just mentioned that there's no dramatic light in the sky, so rainbow is working for it, and then the peak, and then the visual flow that you created because of the stacking and how you composed, and I think it's a very simple yet very beautiful image.
Yeah, well, thank you. It was a really brief moment. The most of the time when this, right after the rainbow was starting to fade and it got really foggy. It actually got really foggy, and like there was rain that was pouring down. We were sitting there like with our umbrellas. So this was kind of a brief moment where it wasn't that like you could actually see in front of you. I think Ryan's take on it and Miles, they show more of a depiction and how the atmosphere was pretty kind of rainy and foggy at the time. Mine was taken at a little bit, I want to say it was a little bit earlier. So, the rainbow, the section, the upper section of the photograph was blended in. It's interesting though, the different takes people can have on the same type of scene. Because if you go and look at Ryan's image from here or Miles's take, they're very different.
That's great. That's great.
Candace, if I can ask you, did you saturate the rainbow? And if you did, can you share how did you saturate it? Did you select it somehow? Can you share your technique with this?
There was really no, I'll be honest, I wish I could say there was something special I did, but there's not. The rainbow and the flowers as well, I tried to make them as natural as possible. If I remember correctly, it was a little bit of vibrance that was added to it, just, nothing, it's just something that you can go into camera raw and do with the slider. But I tried to keep it as simple as possible, because this was one of those rare types of scenes where everything just seemed kind of perfect in itself, you know, like not to say, I mean, nature in itself is perfect, right? But this is one of those things where you feel like if you manipulate it too much, you're actually going to be taking away from the natural beauty, at least in my opinion. But my goal also, you know, style-wise is more, I tend to favor subtle and effective if possible. And hopefully that comes through with this image. Honestly, I processed this 4 years ago or something, so I don't remember what exactly I did, but if I accentuated the rainbow, it was just very minimal, a minimal amount of vibrance added to it. I don't even think I did though. And the same with, I actually desaturated the greens. I desaturated it was the magentas a little bit. I don't want anything to be overwhelming to where your eye is just automatically going to that. I just want it to be cohesive and flow together. And I'm sure I've got a lot of photos out there that are saturated to you know, the point where it's embarrassing. And I'm sure that there's a lot that I could bring up that you'd be like, what were you thinking, right? But as time goes on, I've tried to show more restraint as far as that kind of thing goes. And I think that's actually something that you learn as more time goes on. I could be wrong about that, but I feel like as the years have gone on, I've become more restrained with, you know, just saturating the crap out of things. Because a lot of people do that, right? A lot of people go the overly magenta route, or just to the point where it doesn't look real. And I remember looking at some of my photos from years ago when I was first getting into this, and people were saying they thought that it looked good, but I don't know what they were thinking, because man, it was horrible. I don't know what I was doing back then. It's embarrassing, some of the older stuff. And I'm sure you know the experience. All of you here have images, I'm sure, where you're like, I don't know what I was doing there, but it wasn't good, right? Whether it was you were oversaturating something, or you were just, the composition, you were like, what is that? You know, like there's nothing cohesive about that. That flower is like right in my face, and there's like, what is even going on there? Like I was trying to have the mountain in the back, but you can barely see it. Like it's a learning thing. It's experimenting. You get better as you go along, right?
So what is your like a typical processing workflow looks like? You know, like how do you kind of process your typical images? You know, in general images.
It all depends on the image. I mean, I showed this particular one, this landscape one here, took me several hours. Whereas something like the bear that I showed out in the fall foliage didn't take as long. So if it's something like this, where you know there's going to be a lot involved, then when you're out in the field shooting, you're preparing accordingly for that. You know that you're going to want to focus stack the flowers so that they're sharp and in focus, or at least try to. You know, if it's really windy, you might not be able to achieve that as you would like. So you do that when you're out in the field, the focus stacking, and you take separate exposures. If you know, the sky, you obviously don't want to have that be blown out. So for something like a Milky Way shot, which I didn't bring up here, but if anybody who's shot the Milky Way with a landscape knows that you take the foreground shot if you're shooting something like flowers with it earlier. Right. So it's about preparation, and a big part of that is out in the field. And for processing, you know, your focus stacking, you do, I mean, I could try going through that on here, but it's great to just watch tutorials of it. There's free tutorials out there, or you can, somebody you admire, a photographer you admire, they might have a tutorial about it. Ryan's got tutorials, you know, he's got tutorials where he'll actually walk you through a whole photo and how to put it together. But after you've done that, what I call the nitty gritty part, comes the more fun part, where it's your creative side. I like to try to do as much as I can in camera raw. And the reason for that is because the more you do in there, the less you're actually messing around with the overall quality of the image itself. You know, you want to have as little deterioration to the image as possible, in my opinion, especially if you plan on printing it out. You know, this image here, I probably printed more than any other image. So if you know that it's probably going to be printed large, you want to do your best possible job with it then, right? If it's mainly just for, what's your intention?
Right.
Do you intend on printing it large? Do you want to just have it be on Instagram in a little box and that's it? You know, what's your intention?
We hike miles after miles, spent like, you know, like thousands of dollars going to an exotic locations, wake up night after night, and all to be viewed just in a square inch of spaces in Instagram, right? No, I think end goal is always like printing, I guess, for most of the images.
And I'll be honest, there's photographers out there that do a lot of printing. I'm not one of them. If you want to learn how to do the best possible job with printing, I think the photographer's name is, well, there's a few different photographers out there who have tutorials. Aaron Reed is one of them. Mark Metternich, I believe.
Yeah.
They'll show you how to prep your images for printing. So they've got, but Aaron Reed, I mean, he's brilliant in terms.
Oh yeah, he's brilliant. I mean, his prints are like looks like they're like living objects. Like, you know, I saw his print of that cracks and all, and it looks like it's actually a crack that he's holding in his hand. They're so real. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I mean, and he does this sort of thing for a living where, you know, I think a lot of landscape photographers, they're doing tutorials or workshops, and he does workshops too, but he's found this sort of niche where, you know, he's found companies as far as I know all over the world or in Asia where they're buying you know, these really large prints from him and to go in their businesses, and he's found that sort of niche, and he's brilliant at it. So if you want to learn about, you know, how to print your photos in the best so that they look their very best, I'd recommend, you know, either being taught from him. I think he's got a tutorial on that right now, and he also teaches about it. Or Mark Metternich, also, to my knowledge, does a good job with prepping the image for printing.
So Aaron has a tutorial on printing. I asked him that a couple of months ago, and he said that no, he doesn't have it, but Mark Metternich does have it. Okay, that's good then.
But I'm sure Aaron would be able to give you some pointers on it if you wanted to, you know, to know more about it. And my approach is pretty simple. I don't do anything fancy. I've been going through Bay Photo and Nevada art printers. If you want the more personal approach, you could go somewhere local too. You could find, you know, a printer in your area, I'm sure. But a lot of it has to do with what people ask from you. You know, I don't have my website. I need a lot of work done with it right now, but you know, if it's tailored to what somebody wants. So if somebody reaches out to me and they say, I want it to be this size, floating frame or whatever, it's catered to their needs. It's not, you know, if it's complex, I might not be able to do it for that particular shot. But I don't have just this thing where you can go click on the image, add it to your cart and check out, because for me, I worry that it might not look good. I want it to make sure it looks the best for what they want, right? So I just try to make sure that I get the exact specifications for what somebody wants. And it's not very often that I print out photos. I'm not making, you know, a lot of money off of that sort of thing. But so this photo, though, I did most of the work after the focus stacking. It was actually a lot of it was done in camera raw. And that's what I try to do for most of my images. And then I go to Photoshop from there. I also do use, if you're familiar with the Nik software, for some minor adjustments, you know, tonal contrast, that sort of thing. And Luminar is actually a software that I've started to get into as well, if you're familiar with that. But I don't do a whole lot with those. Luminosity masks as well. I use those, but not as extensively as some do. If you want to learn a lot about luminosity mess, I would highly recommend Sean Bagshaw's tutorial on that. If you haven't already, for anybody watching this, if you want to learn more, Sean Bagshaw's the man. He knows what he's talking about. And he's got a very comprehensive tutorial about that sort of thing. But this image overall took me probably altogether 4 or 5 hours. And a big part of it for me is thinking that something looks off and then going back to it later on. And what I mean by that is I didn't just process it all at once. I processed some of it, then I went back and I processed more. And for me, that's actually key because your eyes get tired after a while.
It does.
And
yeah.
I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but if you keep working when your eyes are tired, things can get ugly. It can become a mess. And so I noticed when I was working on this shot for a while that I really should have stopped because all of a sudden the sky became like this crazy purple. And I don't know how, like it was way off. And so I ended up redoing it. I think a big key for an image that you really want to come out as accurate as possible to the scene or how you envisioned is step away from it for a while, maybe take a day and then come back to it. And I say that because once your eyes are refreshed a little bit more, you'll notice that you'll see something that maybe seems off, that shouldn't have been that way. That's how my brain and my eyes work, at least. I know the same applies to Ryan in certain regards as well. He'll often step away from an image and come back to it and be like, yeah, that doesn't look good. Or
that's one of the best ways to do it.
Yeah, and in this case, I actually asked him for his feedback. I often do. And he said that was really the only thing at the time that he could see that seemed a little bit off was the sky. And so I noticed it too afterwards. And it's good to get other people's opinions too on it. Not from the aspect of like, should I have changed this composition or whatever necessarily, but just from like, if you trust somebody in terms of your workflow and knowing that maybe you have the same ideas in mind, or, you know, Ryan's obviously a master in terms of processing. So I value his feedback and just wanting to know, you know, hey, do you see something that looks off, or what's your advice on this? I don't see that as, I mean, that's how you grow. That's how you learn more, right? But walking you through the entire process though for this shot would take a very long time. I think the longest thing though, the most tedious thing of all was the focus stacking. I'll say that right now. It was a pain in the butt. But it's a pain, I can't complain because that's a pain in the butt for a lot of people with images. If you want it to be all sharp and in focus, right?
Yep. Okay.
That's wonderful. I have one question. Is that probably something beyond what you already do? So regarding your kind of I wrote it down and I lost it. Just give me a moment. Yeah. So I've read it on your website as well and otherwise as well when I was doing some research on you, that you have a deep interest in this Hudson River School movement. So not many have the context on how Romanticism and Impressionism. So you have already talked about it. But do you also do a lot of conservation work regarding the nature conservation and all? So do you want to throw some light on what you do there in terms of nature conservation?
Yeah, so a lot of it is advocacy in terms of speaking out, but also I think the best way to make an impact for conservation is volunteer work. From a hands-on standpoint, at least, because you feel like you're literally making a difference because you are. You're hands-on doing something. And so even though if you're just one person, you know, out there trying to clean up an area as far as litter goes on the ground, or maybe you're removing an invasive species from an area, you're doing it. You're part of a collective effort doing it. You're not just, you know, donating is valuable, obviously. Donating is huge, especially if you can't be there to help out with the situation, right? Like a perfect example is the Australian wildfires that happened, right, a few months ago. What are you gonna do, right? So what you can do though, being so far removed from the situation, is you can help businesses, you can speak out about climate change, you can speak out about things we can be doing collectively to help out for our own part. Because I think that the biggest problem people have, the biggest dilemma people feel with conservation is, but how am I supposed to help? I'm just one person. It's like, what I do doesn't really matter, right? I have nothing to do with those huge businesses that are tearing that down. How am I supposed to, I can't stop them. That's just gonna happen no matter what. They're gonna tear down that rainforest. They're corrupt. This is gonna happen. I can't do anything. And I hear that nonstop from people, and I'll admit I feel that way a lot too sometimes, because the power ultimately is in the hands of those with, you know, the most money, I guess you could say, and certain interests that that might not, you know, fall in the same line with conservation efforts. So for me, I feel that volunteering is a way of making you feel like you're making a change hands-on, whether that's being out there planting trees, whether that's, you know, as I was saying, doing something in your community at a park to remove something that shouldn't be there, like an invasive species. There's easy ways to do that sort of thing. You can just go online and find out what's going on in your local community, how you can help with certain efforts. And one of the best things you can do is plant trees. Planting trees is huge. You can donate to different organizations that do that sort of thing. I am actually I recently agreed to be an ambassador for something called On a Mission, and that's what they do. They plant trees. Their mission is to plant trees, thousands and thousands and thousands of trees, because that is one of the best ways of battling climate change. And there's probably people viewing on here that think climate change isn't a thing, and that's fine. You know, you can think whatever you want, but I do know from the science that it's an issue. It's going to be the biggest issue in our lifetimes. And so I feel like in my position that I almost feel like I'd be guilty to not do something. You know, if you have some kind of a platform that you're reaching, even if it's just, you know, I don't have a big platform, but I feel like I should say something. I should do something, because what does it matter for me to share these pretty photos if it will be gone? You know, if somebody wants to come in and just get rid of that area, if somebody wants to remove that national park, that monument, these are places that are sacred. You know, they're sacred to, a lot of them are sacred to Native Americans. They're areas that are to be respected. And I think that ensuring that we have public lands for people to enjoy for generations is incredibly vital. Because if it's not there in the future, what's the point of doing this? You know, especially I think about my daughter. You know, I want her to make sure she can enjoy this in 20 or 30 years. So she gets out there with me and she volunteers. And it's neat because a couple weeks ago, my daughter emails me now. She's so sophisticated. She sent me an email and said, "Hey mom, this looks like fun. Why don't we do this summer?" And it was just this list of volunteer opportunities in the area. Like, this is what you can be doing in your area. She just wants to do it. It was before volunteer work for Honor Society, but now she just wants to do it because it makes her feel good. And it just broke my heart because she didn't read the whole thing. And it said, like, in the small fine print, like, sorry, but we can't do this until this fall or something due to the due to the virus. Right now, they're not doing those things. So I just broke my hair because she wants to do it so bad. But yeah, the volunteer opportunities are huge. Finding organizations that are at the forefront for conservation efforts. Some of my favorite artists out there, photographers, they're Paul Nicklin. He's, I think most people know who he is at this point. He's one of the most prominent conservation photographers out there. Daisy Gillardini, I'm probably pronouncing her last name wrong. These are photographers I look up to because they're really speaking out in a time where we need to be doing everything we can to try to mitigate our, what our footprint is and what we're doing, and also coming together for positive change, renewable energy, that sort of thing. So what I try to do is, aside from volunteering, I donate to these organizations, and I try to, is also advocating. It's writing your senators. It sounds tedious and boring, but if you don't speak out about it, nothing's going to happen. It's just kind of like what's going on, and I'm not going to get political or anything about this because that's going to upset people, I'm sure. But if you don't put pressure on the people in power, nothing's going to change. Absolutely. That's just as simple as that. You have to make it vocal. Because if you're just like, hey guys, will you please listen to me? This is important to me. Please listen to me. They don't care. You need to make it sound critical. You need to make it sound like, hey, you know what? If you don't do this, we're in a lot of trouble, and it's going to be quick. So that's the kind of urgency that you need to promote, because if you don't, nothing's going to change. And that it's not just with climate change, it's with things going on here in the US right now. It's things, going on in a lot of different countries. It has to do with different topics, not just climate change, but social justice is obviously another thing. But I'm trying to make it sound as peaceful as positive and not negative, because it's not a bad thing to want to fight for the planet, to fight for conservation. It's not a bad thing to want to defend something that can easily be destroyed. People need to see the value in something that they would so easily put a price tag on, but when it's gone forever, right? You can't get it back.
Absolutely. Very well narrated, very well said. I think what so far I've been listening to you and trying to immerse myself in what you're saying, and you are so much there, you're so much into all this, whatever you're doing, that whenever you speak, you're speaking and you all feel for it, that how strongly you feel for this nature conservation and all. And I think that is special. My dog is barking now. So
guys, I haven't had my cat pop up yet. One of my cats, it's amazing. They usually, one of them comes up on my lap and wants to make a show. So that's
just
pretty...
saw the cat, I think. Is that what happened?
Oh, I don't know. I'm not sure. She definitely makes a presence during my Zoom meetings for work. It's like she wants to feel important or something, I swear. So she'll just come up and like start licking my chin when I'm trying to present during one of my Zoom meetings for work. I'm like, oh, this is awesome. This isn't distracting at all. And what are you going to do though?
We have questions, but I think we are also running out of time. But I want to ask you something that I wanted to ask you in the beginning also. But so now it's a very unique husband-wife duo who's trying to do a similar thing. So you also mentioned initially that you are into full-time job and you don't want to lose interest, and you don't want to be getting bored with it when you are getting into full-time. Do you think, now two parts to this question, do you think that you being into your full-time job and Ryan being into full-time photography, do you balance each other in terms of balancing life, internal harmony, and everything else related to it?
a great question.
Thank you.
I think one of the things that really makes our relationship work and well balanced is there's a level of respect there. I think that the foundation of a lot of relationships, it should be based on respect, at least in my opinion. Trust is huge, obviously. But we respect each other and we understand each other on certain levels. He understands that I'm independent and need my sort of alone time. And I understand that he needs his independence and alone time sometimes, but we trust each other. And so we go out shooting together a lot. And there's times where we go out shooting, you know, with other people or alone. He does it for a living. And so sometimes I think because he's always in photography mode, that maybe sometimes he can become jaded to it to a certain degree, which I don't blame him at all. I'm sure I would too, right? It can get tiresome after a while, especially like the pressures of social media and all that, and always feeling like you need to level up, right? When you're like considered to be on a certain level, when you have this public perception, I can't, you know, I would imagine that's difficult, right? And so I feel like a lot of times when we're out together shooting, that I try to encourage him to unwind a bit more, like just think about things from, you know, like, hey, you don't always have to, like, it doesn't always have to be epic or whatever. And because you're always in that mode when you're doing it full time, you always feel like, okay, this is how it needs to be, or I need to be able to get something from this in order to, you know, this is for my portfolio, you know, and this is going to further me in my career. So it can be difficult, right? Because you want to have that balance too, where you're spending time together and with each other and just having the time together, right? With each other. And when there's two photographers there, but you're also in the photography mindset, it's like, regardless, you're going to think, oh yeah, that was awesome, or that was really cool, right? Whereas you'll go and see another couple and they're just like holding each other like, oh, I'm so in love and looking at this sunset. And for us, it's like snap, 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 you know, like, so that's just I think that's part of what we do, right?
Yeah,
that's part of being
so
an artist. Sorry, go ahead.
No, so you both, when you look at the sunset and you say, wow, F8, 1/200, ISO 100. That looks awesome.
And I'm not even thinking from a, you know, I'm sure what goes on in his brain is totally different from what goes on in my brain. We were recently on a trip, and you know, his brain works differently. So he just knew exactly what he wanted. He found his spot. He had everything set up, and he's a freaking, you know, he's a master in terms of knowing this kind of stuff and what he should be doing, right? So I applaud him for that. For me, on the other hand, of course, I'm the flighty one who's all over the place. And he understands that about me, right? Like, I'm not just looking at the sunset. I'm looking at this big chunk of wood there, like this tree that's out there, hard chunk of wood on the beach. I'm looking at these rocks, you know, that are in there. I'm finding this sort of intimate scene that other people will probably hate looking at it, but you know what? I think it looks cool, so I don't care. And that's how my mind works. And I think it's really great because we kind of, we complement each other, I think, you know. It would be boring if we both did the same thing, I think. And so that's one of the things I think for workshops, you know, talking about working together, we both bring different aspects into it. And so that'll be exciting. Like I said, we were supposed to do this autumn, but just for safety concerns, we're pushing that out. That was going to be autumn at Glacier. But yeah, he's, you know, most of his workshops that he leads are overseas, you know, going for weeks at a time to Africa or Norway, right? And that was actually where we had our honeymoon, was Norway. But that might be what might be a big challenge for some marriages or relationships, to have your significant other be absent or gone for a couple of weeks. For us, it works because of that element of trust, I think, and also because it's just this understanding that we have there. I understand that when he goes, you know, off for a few weeks, that it's his job. You know, people might see it as like, oh, he's just having fun with, you know, lions or whatever over in Africa. But at the end of the day, it's his job. You know, he's doing that because he's doing that for his career as well. So it might sound very mechanical, but it's the truth too. I mean, we want to teach a workshop together in Glacier as a means to work together, because we haven't really done that yet. But, you know, it's at the end of the day, it's also what you're doing for a living. For me, it would be part-time, right? But it's also your position. I guess job is a bad word to use, right? It's your profession, right?
It's a profession. It's a profession and passion as well. So I think very well explained, I think. So we are already 15 minutes beyond our couple of hours, and I think I in particular really enjoyed listening to your whatever you are saying from the heart, and I think that makes a lot of sense to all of us, and I think that is the need of the art today, specifically because when all these powerful people are out there trying to ruin the nature, and conservation has gone for a toss, and looking at their short-term and myopic kind of goals, which do not translate into the future. And you rightly said in your website as well, and I was reading, what are we going to leave for our children, and what are we going to work towards that? And I think that works. That speaks volumes about you, and I think that is what makes you stand apart and on at a different level altogether. So we have photographers, but then we have very few photographers who are actually so passionate about conservation as well, and that is the differentiator, I think.
And it wasn't, it wasn't until a couple of years ago that I really started to dive into it more, and I feel guilty for it. Actually, I feel like I should have taken it more seriously sooner. I feel almost like I was distracted by wanting to improve myself, that it lost sight of what really matters. And self-improvement, of course, is huge. You know, you always want to keep growing. I feel like if you're not growing and, you know, you're stagnant, then there's something wrong there. But at the same time, doing the right thing, and, you know, this level of doing what you're able to do for some, you know, an overall community and the planet, that to me takes priority over just my own self-improvement. And I don't see why you can't do both at the same time, because self-improvement and growing is really, you know, that's objective. That's, you could tell me that you think that I am growing as an artist and I don't see it. Or vice versa. I could say, well, I'm growing because I'm doing more wildlife photography, but you don't see it because I'm not doing grand landscapes as much, right? So it's all subjective. It's not something that I think can just be easily defined. And I wanted to say, you're talking about conservation, just relating it to the Hudson River School, since we didn't talk about that too in depth, but there's one of my favorite all-time quotes from Bierstadt is, the magnificent beauty of the natural world is a manifestation of the mysterious natural laws that will forever obscure from us. So the magnificent beauty of the natural world is a manifestation of the mysterious natural laws that will be forever obscured from us. The Hudson River School played a huge part in what is now known to be conservation efforts, because they saw that nature was supposed to, you know, it could coexist with humanity and that it should be respected. And back then, you know, with manifest destiny and all of that, it was just this kind of notion of, we're going to explore the rest of the country, see what we can, you know, for building, obviously, and all that. But when they came in and created these works of art that just showed if there was a human element in them, they were dwarfed by just this raw, powerful nature around them. And I think that was really important because it actually set the tone for, and in the case of, I believe it was Thomas Cole, it helped establish Yellowstone National Park. It set the tone for conservation in the future. So that was the other reason for me why the Hudson River School was so influential, was from a conservation aspect, not just the overall, drama and beauty of the images, but the fact that they were making a point. They were saying, hey, yeah, I know what's going on right now, and this country is going to be built up here soon, but geez, it would be a shame if we lost this, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. This is so wonderful. Listening to you has been quite a revelation and quite an eye-opener for all of us. And thank you, Candace, again, and thank you from all of us here. Anybody wants to say anything, guys? So,
Thanks for joining us, Candace.
Thanks for joining.
Thanks for joining. It's been phenomenal couple of hours, and I'm sure that these are going to stick with us and going to, in a way, haunt us and maybe make us aware whenever we are out. And probably I, for certain, for sure, am going to think about it the moment I'm there. Your thought and your words are going to really echo in my mind about conservation and how to really go about doing it. And I think that's phenomenal. Thank you, Candace, for joining us. Yeah, it's been wonderful having you. And I think everybody has been sticking so passionate. There's one, our regular viewer here, Sarita on YouTube, is saying that beautiful images and passionate about her cause for nature and to stand for it. Great. So everybody is going gaga about your cause and your images. Thank you so much. And before we really sign off, one customary kind of screenshot that we will take. So all smiles and thumbs up. So let me just first get ready. So thumbs up and big smile on everybody's faces. Guys, it's been wonderful day, wonderful evening. And thank you, Candace, all over again. Okay, bye. Take care.
Thank you.
Yes. I see.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.